make sure that we keep it up, right? We'll have some more announcements about later today about how the nursing home and senior visitation can occur and some of the things that we've been working on. But fundamentally, we are doing well enough that we just need to show the will to be able to continue these types of precautions because they are working in Colorado. We actually only have 146 people currently hospitalized with COVID-19 in our state. And we're grateful that at the same time, of course, we are still almost every day losing Coloradans to this pandemic. We are now at 1,835 Coloradans who have lost their lives to COVID, and we express our condolences to the families and friends and loved ones of those affected. We can't let our guard down. The virus is still here. We need to wear our masks. We need to keep up the social distancing and avoid large groups, particularly important with Labor Day weekend approaching. Before we get into the COVID announcements, I want to update folks on the fires. We have 8 large fires across the state of state concern. There's also a number of small fires that are being handled locally. But on the big fires, Pine Gulch Fire, 135,920 acres. Currently the second largest fire in our state history, just a couple thousand acres shy of being the largest, now 47% contained. Grizzly Creek Fire, 32,000 acres, 61% contained. Cameron Peak Fire, 21,000 acres, 0% contained. And Williams Fork Fire, 11,700 acres, 5% contained. Good news on the Bluestone Fire, 168 acres, 100% contained. The Thorpe Fire, 160 acres, Forest Service land, 50% contained, and we actually just lifted the evacuations on the Thorpe Fire. The East Fork Fire, just over 100 acres last night in Los Animas County, but not threatening homes or infrastructure in that area. And finally, the Willis Fire near San Isabel, about 40 acres. So those are some of the updates. We still have dry, hot conditions. We had limited precipitation in parts of the state yesterday, but not enough to make a big difference. We all hope that folks are doing what they can to get rain, and hopefully we'll have rain at some point that'll make an impact on the fire situation in our state. As you know, from the very start, this is both a health crisis in the pandemic and an economic crisis that ensues out of the health side. The state has really stepped up early on the response on the economic side. And today I'm pleased to announce that the Energize Colorado Gap Fund, which you're going to hear more about shortly, is launching next Monday, August 31st. It's a really bold proposal, an effort by both the Democrats and Republicans in the legislature coming together over relief to small businesses, 25 employees and less. It's a fund of more than $25 million, both grants and loans, targeted to small businesses, minority-owned businesses, rural businesses, those who weren't able to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, and 25 employees or less, up to $15,000 for each small business in grant funding, and $20,000 in low-interest loans, so a total of $35,000 available. The website is energizecolorado.com, and you'll be hearing more about it, but applications will be open Monday, and I want to thank Kent Thiry and his team. Kent is the co-chair of the GAP Fund. He helped get buy-in and support across the state, really instrumental for our success. I also want to thank the partnership between the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade and this effort, using some of the state incentive dollars to leverage for help for small businesses. I want to thank Betsy Markey and her entire team for their work, really jumping on board enthusiastically in short time, getting this off the ground, applications Monday, money out the door shortly thereafter. And this proposal passed both chambers of the state legislature unanimously. That's no easy feat at a time when we see some of the divisions that we have. There's always more that unites us than separates us, and support for our small businesses is really one of those powerful motivators that brings folks together across the ideological and geographic divide to really show the commitment to so many hardworking Coloradans across the state. So I'm grateful for everyone who worked on this effort to get us where we are. And with that, I want to turn it over to one of the bill's chief and lead sponsors in the state Senate, Senator Faith Winter.
Thank you, Governor, for having us here today. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk about Energize Colorado. We know that small businesses need our support right now. And really where the motivation to run this bill came from was when the first rounds of PP money was released. On that day, I had small business owners from my district calling me up with gratitude that they got money, and I had others calling me up in tears. That they didn't get money through the PPP loans, that they didn't have the right relationship with their banks, they didn't have, the application process was complicated, that they didn't eventually make it across the finish line, and for them getting that PPP loan was a difference between laying off their employees, it was a difference between paying their mortgage and staying open and feeding their own families. And talking to those business owners that day, I knew we had to create something that was easy to use. We had to create something that was focused on small businesses, women-owned businesses, businesses owned by people of color in our rural areas. And that's exactly what we did. And one of the things I'm most proud about is that the application process for Energize Colorado that's going to go up on Monday, it's easy to use. I went through the application and you can complete it in 15 minutes. And that is essential because right now our businesses should be rightfully focusing on staying open, taking care of their employees, talking to their customers. And now with a 15-minute easy to use, easy to access application online on Monday, we know we can get the support to the businesses that need it the most, the backbone of Colorado. And I'm most excited that this came together both through the bill we ran, but also through a lot of donations from the private sector. This is an example of Coloradans coming together with unanimous support in the State House and State Senate, partnership with the private sector, and is going to be a way that's really going to be a lifeline to those rural, small, women-owned, and people of color-owned businesses.
And thank you. Another real leader on this bill and a strong champion of small business is Senator Jeff Bridges.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Senator Winter. And when I look at this bill is in many ways a fantastic example of how it is that we do things right here in Colorado. It was, I think it passed unanimously, so this bill came through with unanimous support, and it had input from folks on both sides of the aisle. In fact, I had a long conversation with Senator Jim Smallwood shortly after this bill was introduced. And originally the bill said if you got any PPP loans, you would be further down in the list for prioritization in this bill. And he said, you know, I have this yoga studio owner who has a yoga studio in Denver, and she just didn't get enough from PPP. She applied for $50,000 and got less than 20, and it's not enough to keep her in business. Can you change this bill so that you can have folks that got some money from PPP but didn't get enough money from PPP? And so we made a change to this bill. We got Senator Smallwood's support, and we passed it unanimously through both the Senate and the House. And this is how legislation ought to work. You know, the feds, the PPP program, good start. Very, very, very great results for a lot of Colorado companies, but it left some folks behind. And so we at a state level had the opportunity to fill that gap. And thanks to the great work from Kent Theory on the application process, Kent and many others, this is something that small business owners can take care of in 15 minutes. This is not something that you have to take a whole day to apply for. You don't have to have a great relationship with your bank like you did with the PPP loans. This is for those small Colorado businesses that just need a little bit of help to get through this. Incredible bill, great bipartisan support on this, and thank you very much, Governor, and to all those at Energize Colorado for getting this on. Apply Monday. Applications open Monday. Check out the website, energizecolorado.com.
Thank you, and our co-chair of the effort, and I want to thank Kent Theory for stepping up for Colorado small businesses, and we'll turn it over to Kent.
It's an honor to be with everyone here today. Equality of opportunity, one of the sacred aspirational concepts of our democracy and our free society. Also one of the most difficult to make come true. And that's why today's particularly exciting, because the GAP Fund is a big step towards that aspirational direction. What is the GAP Fund that's opening up on Monday? How does it work, and how did we get here? What is it? It's a public-private philanthropic alliance raising funds to help save small businesses throughout the state, particularly, as has been mentioned, businesses owned by women, businesses owned by minorities, businesses owned by veterans, and businesses located in rural areas. We all know that these four populations, even pre-COVID, suffered from special challenges and obstacles in trying to get access to capital. Those challenges, that gap between them and others, is only made worse by COVID, and that's what the GAP Fund is about. We need to close that gap, not only out of principle, but out of pragmatic regard for the fact that these small businesses will be the engine of our economic resurgence as a state. How does it work? It's pretty simple. Go to energizercolorado.com and you'll see all the details. The application is quite user-friendly. We're also available to help as many people as we can in filling out the application if you are having any difficulty, just as we're going to offer help to people post-awards as best we can to help them deploy the money that they're awarded. We've got nonprofit lenders throughout the state that are sensitive to these communities. They're going to be working hard with the applicants to make all this happen and make sure we put these dollars in the place where they'll drive the most economic recovery. How did we get here to this exciting spot? Well, a whole bunch of people deserve gratitude, but first, the state of Colorado deserves a heads up on this. This is Coloradans helping Coloradans. I often talk about how there's a lot of other states that have residents that live there, happy residents. Colorado still has a lot of citizens, not in the legal sense of a citizen, citizens in terms of a sense of stewardship, a sense of accountability for the state, a sense of pride in the state, a sense of caring for all people in all places in the state. This is still a way in which Colorado is different from so many other places, and the GAP Fund is both a manifestation of that and hopefully something that will contribute to it going forward. But I would like to pay special thanks to Brad Feld and Mark Nagar, who were some of the original co-parents of this. I'd like to acknowledge the leadership of the governor throughout the process and his Economic Recovery and Stabilization and Recovery Council. The Office of Economic Development has appropriately already been mentioned, the Economic Development Commission, CHAFA, the Colorado Housing Facility, deserves a big thank you. And then there have been some very serious donors who've stepped up, donors of time and talent and treasure. And in that group, I want to include again Brad Feld and Amy Batchelor, the Gates Family Foundation, the Zoma Foundation, the Gary Community Foundation, the Colorado Health Foundation, Pinnacle, Wendy Lee, Larissa Herda. I could go on and on, I won't, but these have been people who stepped up early and stepped up big to make this come true. We will not only save businesses with this money, we will save families and we'll save communities and be an important part of Colorado's economic and spiritual resurgence. Thank you.
And once again, thank you, Ken Theory, thank you, Senator Bridges, thank you, Senator Winter, and thank you to really everybody else who helped make EnergizeColorado.com available to help save our Colorado small businesses during this pandemic. A couple other items before we get to questions. We all know the economic impact of COVID-19 on economic security. One element of economic security is housing. We've had executive orders in place around delaying and evictions and giving folks more time to be able to stay in their home and meet their responsibility, as well as getting a lot of money out the door through DOLA and through the COVID Relief Fund at helpcoloradonow.org. To help people be able to stay in their homes during a time of difficult and uncertainty. Today, we're creating a temporary task force with the Department of Local Affairs to really look at the housing instability issues associated with COVID-19, to really develop concrete, actionable recommendations. It could be for us or for the legislature, suggestions that will really help make sure that as we get through this crisis, that we don't face another housing crisis on the tail end, because the looming housing issue is really a complicated challenge. There's no easy solution. We're going to be pulling in 10 folks with very different backgrounds: housing advocates, development, advocacy, banking, local government, to work with Department of Local Affairs and Rick Garcia, the Strategic Housing Working Group, and other stakeholders, to really present the very best ideas we can about how Colorado can lead on housing stability, looking at things like how we can connect Coloradans to key services they may be eligible for and not know it, alleviating financial hardships facing Coloradans, helping with the landlord-tenant relationship, and of course boosting capacity of housing, and both the resources and the physical side in the short, medium, and long term. So we're looking forward to getting actionable items and thoughts on what more the state can do to show that Colorado leads in that area. Finally, I want to acknowledge and talk about another vulnerable community that's faced really a double threat from this virus, and that's our older Coloradans facing the brunt of the health threat, with hospitalization rates as high as 1 in 3, 1 in 4 for folks in their 70s and 80s, but also the difficulties associated with social isolation to protect themselves from the virus. So we have, as you know, put a priority on how we can have safer visitation for people in nursing homes and senior care facilities. A couple weeks ago, we launched the outdoor visitation program. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we are releasing guidelines for indoor visitation for seniors, for nursing homes. This policy is being posted today and will be taking public comments through Friday, finalizing it over the weekend. These are the very thoughtful safety guidelines around indoor visits. It's obviously a balance between ensuring that our older adults are protected and allowing older adults to be with their loved ones. This doesn't mean that all of a sudden visits start like they did a year ago or 6 months ago. We've seen the death toll from outbreaks in senior living facilities and nursing homes, and we don't want that to occur again, nor do those who want to safely visit their loved ones want to jeopardize their lives and the lives of their friends. But that doesn't mean that we can't find a way to make it happen, just like we want to make sure that in a pandemic all aspects of society are able to function and have some semblance of sustainability and normalcy. We know that those social interactions with our loved ones are a overdue piece that we figure out, and we hope that these guidelines will work for many of our senior care facilities. Keep in mind that there are other residential facilities that have much stricter guidelines in the state, and people sometimes call us and say they're not letting us in or to visit. It could be a dying relative or even outdoors. The state does not control what those private facilities do. And yes, many of them have locked down because that's what their residents want and that's what their caretakers want. And they're able to do that in a free state and a free country. But our goal is to establish guidelines that for nursing homes and senior care facilities that want to allow more safe visitation, there's a good science and data-driven way to do that. While nothing is zero risk, really all the measures to reduce the likelihood that these safe visitations would lead to additional deadly outbreaks. So that draft is out today, comments through Friday, and we look forward to those visitations occurring as soon as next week. You know what? This recovery is about our health, and it's about helping our businesses get through this difficult time with Energize Colorado. It's really a big piece to help particularly those businesses that were left out of PPP, didn't get enough in PPP, minority-owned, women-owned, rural, get through this difficult time. We are all in this together, and today we're emphasizing how we will not leave our small businesses behind. The Energize Colorado Gap Fund, the Evictions Task Force around tenants and renters and how we can better support those in need during this crisis. And very importantly, finally, the new guidelines for visiting senior facilities, so important for the psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being of both our seniors and their loved ones who want to visit folks who live in residential facilities. Our deep commitment to our continued guiding principle of working together to get through both the health and the economic impact of this pandemic, with Colorado leading the way on resiliency. With that, we'll take some questions.
Governor, on the senior visitation issue, looking at some of the things that are in these guidelines, one of them
is you have to have a test result within 24 hours. Is that feasible with the wait times for tests right now? The second, it sets a case amount for each county. I'm curious if you know how many counties would qualify for this as it's written under the draft guidelines right now.
Yeah. So there's two different protocols in there. One is the broad protocol in counties with low incidence that are able to be less restrictive. The protocol around the 24-hour test, I believe, is valid in every county. So I can confirm that, but that would be, now, if there's a enormous spike in a county, that might go offline too, but even the moderate spikes we have, they're all under the threshold and would allow for the 24-hour test. There are plenty of 24-hour tests being done. There will be more done in the future. Our free, quick, and easy testing sites are more like 2 days, so that would not be, nor do we want to bog those down with people that have no reason to believe they were exposed and just want it for their own purpose. Those are really for any Coloradan experience any symptoms or who thinks they might have been exposed. Federal Heights, Waterworld, Aurora Sports Center, Pepsi Center, Citadel Mall in Colorado Springs, Pueblo County Fairgrounds. Really easy. You don't need a doctor referral. Just go get a test. But yes, these are the 24-hour tests. So many of the hospitals themselves that have labs are doing tests with that kind of turnaround. We are extremely optimistic in the future about building capacity around quick turnaround tests. We are in the process of validating the University of Colorado saliva test, 45-minute turnaround, which would suffice for these purposes. We expect news on that in the coming week or two. There's also a protocol that has been validated in other states released by Yale University that could also be applied for this purpose. And finally, we have the Abbott quick testing platform, limited supply in the state, but also available with a 15 to 20-minute turnaround to support senior home visitation.
Governor Polis, good afternoon. It's David Clue at Denver 7. A legal precedent was set about 2 years ago in New York when the governor mandated vaccines during a measles outbreak there. Would you consider mandating a COVID-19 vaccine once one is approved?
We have the opposite frustration in that there will be limited dosage available of a vaccine as it comes online. So the real question that the federal government and states will deal with based on the advice of medical professionals is how do you prioritize? Clearly it will be those most at risk, those over the age of 60, frontline workers, law enforcement, grocery workers, others. So how do you prioritize a limited number of dosage that is available, hopefully as soon as November or December, right? Quite possibly not till January or February, but with some ability on the vaccination side, once those are established as safe and effective, how can we make sure that we have the highest and best use of the limited supply that will be available in our state is the real question that we're beginning to grapple with. It was the subject of part of my conversation with Dr. Hahn, the head of the Food and Drug Administration, during his visit to Colorado last week.
Governor, you frequently look outside of government during the coronavirus crisis to help Coloradans do this with Mr. Theory or Brad Feld. Can you talk a little bit about why you've done that so often and what good things have come out of it, maybe some struggles as well?
Yeah, I'll address it generally and with Energize. I mean, I think Energize is a perfect example of a public and private partnership to help Colorado's small businesses. The businesses are private, 25 people or less, mom and pop shops, small businesses. But it takes a collaboration between the public sector and private sector leaders like Ken Theory to make it work in a way that's operational for small businesses. Now, more generally, when this crisis hit, we knew that we have great minds and great thinkers in the public sector. I also know that there's a lot of great minds and leaders and thinkers in the private sector. Now was not a time in the coronavirus crisis to make that artificial distinction. I wanted to call in the very best Coloradans, regardless of their day jobs, regardless of whether they work in business, regardless of whether they work at a public health agency, to be part of our solution to the health side and the economic side. So on the economic side, we tapped Federico Pena, himself somebody whose career has spanned the public and private sector, to pull together several hundred private sector leaders, of which Kent Thiry was one, and a number of others in different verticals, to give us the very best recommendations about the economic response to the pandemic for Colorado. We have since operationalized most of their recommendations that we could through executive action. The legislature took their advice on other matters and put into law some of those items. There remains some to be done. On the health side, for our emergency response team and innovation response team, we tapped some of the top talent in the private sector, some ultimately joining the public sector, like Sarah Thunberg, our head of testing, who previously had been a private sector entrepreneur but also had experience in disaster recovery, as well as others like Brad Feld and many others who are willing to put aside their work, put their private sector work on hold, and said, we're going to help the state figure out data, figure out tracing and tracking, figure out testing. And so it's really an appeal to what's best in all Coloradans to really come together around one of the biggest challenges that humanity has faced and one of the biggest challenges that Colorado has faced.
Hi, Governor Mary Ann Goodland with Colorado Politics. Can you respond to the changes in the advice of the Centers for Disease Control on Monday that discourages people who are asymptomatic and have been in close contact with an infected person, that they don't necessarily need to go get a test? And will Colorado follow that advice?
So I did look through that, and I think it was partially misconstrued. It was really in the context of prioritization of testing. And in that context, we agree that if there's not enough tests, you, of course, should allocate testing for those who are symptomatic. Well, we're in a very different situation in Colorado. We have plenty of testing capacity. In fact, we have at Water World and Aurora Sports Center and Pepsi Center, we have 200, 300, 400 a day. We could double the amount of people that come. That's why if you were exposed, you can come for a test, and by no means are you in any way taking away a test from somebody else who needs it. We have that extra capacity. It's free, quick, and easy in over 50 community testing sites across Colorado, but certainly the sort of 5 mega sites from Pueblo up through the Denver metro area. So I think in the context of a shortage of testing, some kind of triage makes sense, but that is not our experience in Colorado. And it is very important that those who think they might be exposed themselves take advantage of the free, quick, and easy testing, because the sooner that you can identify that you might be contagious, the sooner you can take the effective steps of self-isolating and making sure that it doesn't affect those who you live with or your friends and family.
Governor, two quick questions. I wanted to confirm saliva tests will be acceptable for the elderly care visitation?
Once they're validated, yes.
Are you confident that'll have accuracy?
Well, I mean, you can never, until they're validated, that's pending. But there's, the Yale test has been validated in other states. The Colorado CU test is currently in the process of being validated. Once they are validated, they will be accepted for testing purposes.
And then, in terms of vaccines, what is the status of developing a vaccine distribution plan, and when would you anticipate we'll see some details of that?
So I talked to Dr. Hahn about that last week. He was in town and really has done great work in allowing innovative treatments to reach the market. And to be clear, there's been a lot of discussion about plasma and other treatments. There is not yet a game-changing treatment around coronavirus. There are better therapeutic results from remdesivir, tentatively from plasma, potentially reducing hospital stay, even fatality, 20-30%, but nothing that dramatically changes the clinical trajectory of this virus yet. We hope that there are. On the vaccine front, we did have a preliminary discussion, and the federal government is as well, about how that prioritization will look, how we can use risk-based factors, obviously beginning with those who would have the most severe risk of death or hospitalization from coronavirus, to prioritize for an effective vaccination once that's available.
Governor, this is Dan Micah from Biz West Media in Fort Collins. When the first round of the PPP applications were opened up in April, the Small Business Administration portal was having a lot of recurring site crashes, and some businesses were struggling to even get into the website to start the application. How is the GAP fund that you spoke about today, how is that preparing to avoid technical issues like that on the first kind of wave of applications? And also at this point, how quickly is the state and the GAP Fund expecting to start dispersing funds after a business has been approved?
And let me go to Ken Theory on that to kind of address the timing for the assistance and the launching of the website.
No, thanks for the question. We've worked awfully hard on the application software, not only to make it easy to use, but to make it resilient and to hopefully have it ready for the unknown amount of demand that will pop up on that first day, second day, third day, et cetera. So we're working with professionals. It's the same software that's been used by the Colorado Relief Fund, so it's been tested. And we'll be watching it exceptionally carefully, literally daily meetings at 7:30 in the morning to react to any problems that anybody has in Colorado with that system. So we're as prepared as we can be, and then we're ready to adjust if we need to. And then as to the timing of actually distributing money, we're first going to spend a few weeks just gathering applications and doing the comparing, doing the due diligence required in order to be responsible with these funds. But about 4 weeks into it is when we should start to see some of the first checks going out to deserving Colorado businesses. So somewhere in that 4 to 6 week range will be the first pool of distributed funds.
Thank you. Español?
Para Noticias Univisión, el gobernador, ¿a quién va dirigido el fondo y cuáles son las prioridades?
Todos los negocios pequeños y micronegocios a menos de 25 empleados pueden participar en este fondo y pueden recibir hasta $35,000 $10,000 de fondos directos y pueden más acceso a $15,000 para tener soluciones para sus negocios. Hay una prioridad en las aplicaciones y aquellas empresas incluyen empresas con propiedad mayorita de minorías, mujeres, veteranos y también rurales. Apoyen en un sector turístico que están más afectados de esta enfermedad y también negocios con acceso limitado a financiamiento de capital para sus negocios pequeños. So, pueden ir a el website energizecolorado.com para obtener más información en español o inglés sobre este programa de ayuda de nuestros negocios pequeños.
This is Meg Wingeter from the Denver Post. You mentioned about that for the nursing home visitation, that it was going to be a balance between trying to protect people from the virus, but also reducing the isolation. Is there any plan to evaluate this once it goes into effect on how these this particular set of regulations is working or not?
So far, we have had a positive experience with the outdoor visitation protocols. We believe that these indoor visitation protocols are reasonably safe. We will closely be monitoring, as we do anyway, outbreaks at senior living and congregate care facilities, and we will also be able to track that back to where and how the visitation program is being implemented. The information will be available to the state for the different residential programs that choose to implement this, and we'll also, I hope, be able to do some kind of comparison between those who implement this and those that have more restrictive protocols or continue not to allow visitation.
Governor, over the weekend you tweeted that the events that took place in Denver, you characterized them as criminal terrorism. Aurora Mayor Mike Kaufman used that term when classifying some property damage in his own city. A lot of people saw that tweet and wonder if it prioritizes property over people's lives. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think that damage to life, liberty, and property is the great concern here. And while we all strongly support the right of people to engage in free speech and protest, it's also important that there's a responsibility that comes with that, and that's to avoid injury to people or to property, and making sure that we continue that proud American condition, making sure that we continue that proud American tradition of a vibrant political discussion about how we can have a more just society, and at the same time that people feel safe in their homes and in their businesses.
Hi, this is Patty Nyberg from the Associated Press. In regards to the new GAP fund, Senator Bridges, you mentioned the yoga example and who applied for PPP loans and didn't get enough, and you said that you changed the bill. So I just want to be clear, is that every business, regardless of getting PPP, will be considered equal to those who didn't qualify? And I have a second question, which would be, how long do you expect these funds will last? Is this an ongoing fund or just one time? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you very much. And just to be clear on what happened in the bill is, originally, if you had received any support from the PPP program, you were deprioritized in the list. What we did is we changed that to say if you received more than $25,000 from PPP, you were deprioritized in the list. So you could have received up to that $25,000, and that won't count against you in terms of where you rank on your ability to get those loans. And in terms of how long it will last, I think I should turn that over to someone else on that one.
We are anticipating that the GAP fund will operate all the way through 2021, and at that point we'll step back and see how much value we're adding for our state and our people.
And I think one of the issues with PPP is many of the very small businesses that are really the goal of Energize Colorado to help didn't have the banking relationships and didn't get PPP. Or, as Jeff indicated, might have gotten a very small amount. But if a business, for instance, was only eligible for $4,000 or $5,000, they might not have been able to on time get their application together and do all the work associated with that. So they might not have gone for it at all, or even if they did, it was just the $4,000 or $5,000. So this really helps fill in some of those holes, as well as really empower businesses that weren't able to get PPP to have some of their liquidity needs met for a short period of time to help get them through this crisis. Senator Winter, did you want to address kind of how this helps fill some of those gaps as well?
Sure, thank you, Governor. A lot of folks didn't have that banking relationship or banked with credit unions, which made it much more difficult to get PPP. Especially when you're a small business, you're not spending your time developing that relationship with your banking partner, you're developing those relationships with your consumers and your business partners. When I talk to a lot of mom and pop places in my district, mom and pop places running nail salons or a local restaurant, a local delivery business, it was a very difficult level to reach to get PPP, which is why I am so happy about the work that Ken Theory and his group has done to make sure that these applications are easy and accessible and ready to use and will take a few minutes compared to a lot of calls that it took to get PPP loans. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done.
One more on the phone, or
Can I just...
Sure, sorry, this is unrelated to the program, but you've heard some criticism from advocates who would like you to do more to prevent outbreaks in state prisons and to reduce prison populations. As you know, you allowed your early release order to lapse. What was your thinking around that order, and what is your broader response to that?
Sure, let me, before we get to that, Senator Bridges had something to add on the other.
Sure. Thank you very much, Governor. And just to build on that change that we made to the bill, it came out of conversation with small businesses, with folks on the other side of the aisle. And again, this is a great example of how government in Colorado works. We've got dysfunction in other places in our country politically, but in Colorado, we came together and we did what was best for the businesses that we know we need to support here in Colorado.
And we have been really doing pioneering work to reduce prison outbreaks, and we've been more successful than many other states. What we found to be the most successful combination is immediately surging testing, where there is a positive case, even one, and we recently did that, where we tested over, and we'll get you the numbers, but it was hundreds of people over a day or two. Excuse me. And then mask wearing, which we implemented very early in the prison system, and then also the protocols for locking down and isolating particular cell blocks, and the continued measures of limiting transfers to prevent the introduction and then additional testing around the people that do come in, which are the guards. So even if you lock down transfers on prisoners, making sure that we can surge testing to make sure that more of those prison guards are tested and not unknowingly bringing the virus in. Thank you all so much.